So this is a second video for 3D basics. And what I wanted to talk about in here is some 3D do's and don'ts. So when I started this on the first video, I had made you guys a 75 by 75 foot square playground as a template. And that would look something like this. So I said at 75. Remember, the template is already set up for feet and inches. You're still drawing in inches, but if you hit, I'm going to move this a little bit. If you hit right here where it says at 75, you're going to get 75 inches. But if you say apostrophe, comma 75 apostrophe, you're going to get a 75 foot object. And the same works for lines, circles. If you just throw that apostrophe in, you will get 75 feet. Okay. And right here, I'm going to go down to a southwest isometric view. What I did was I extruded this. I think it was maybe 6 inches. Okay. And so now you can see that this has thickness, and this is really the first tool that I'm going to talk about is the Extrude Tool, the most basic tool that we have. Okay. But what I would do, so here's realistic right here, and I'm going to go to 2D wireframe. So now you can see that this playground surface has thickness like a piece of concrete or something else. Okay. And I covered this in the last video as well. And I said what you would want to do, like the easiest thing for you to do would be to use lines and go right along the top of the playground, so the top surface of what you could call the concrete, and really making sure that you're grabbing the top endpoints or intersections right there. Okay. And what that's done, now I can go ahead and delete this, and I'll have just a square, and that's going to be much, much easier for me to deal with. Partially because I can use these individual boundary lines as offsets like I did in this one, where I wanted to make sure that the tower was parallel to the outside of the playground and just a few feet over on both sides. I think I offset this 5 feet. Okay. So the biggest purpose, the main purpose of this video is again to re-emphasize that all good 3D objects start as good 2D objects. And if I wanted to draw, so I'm going to draw two squares. Okay, I'm going to say this one is going to be 10 feet. It really doesn't matter how big I make it, but I'm just going to make it 10 feet all the way around. All right, 10 feet this way and 10 feet this way. So as you can see, going back to the beginning of what we did in 2D, these are lines, really, I mean, they are individual lines, but versus a polyline, if I were to go 10 feet this way, and then 10 feet this way, and 10 feet this way, and close it, you can see the distinct difference here. When I hover over this, the entire square is a completed or a linked surface. I guess you could say like a closed loop. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and copy the one here that is not a closed loop as well, just to emphasize one way that we're going to, another way of doing the same thing instead of using polylines. I don't use polylines that often. Okay. So the most basic tool, look at what's happening down here. This is called the UCS icon. And when we were in 2D, if I go up to a top view, you can see I only have X and Y, right? X is right and left, and Y appears to be up and down, but it's actually not. It's forward and backward. So when we go to a 3D perspective, which I just did by toggling here, right? I'm just going to constantly use this to toggle from here to here, okay? You can also do that with the view cube up here. If I click on top, but you can see sometimes it'll actually rotate you. So if top reads normal, then you are all set. And if I go to the home button, when I hover over it, it allows me to see that 3D perspective. Okay. So Extrude is the tool that we use to convert 2Ds into 3Ds. So if I click Extrude and I select this object. You can see this was a closed polyline, right? I click it, I right click, and when I can go up or I can go down, and I can type in any distance I want, 5 feet, let's say, okay? Let me go to a realistic perspective, and you can see now that this is a complete solid, okay? It is a solid block, just like a piece of cheese, okay? But what I'm going to do here is go back, and I'm going to extrude again these lines, and I'm going to go up 5 feet, same distance. So why do they look different? These are, let's go back to a realistic, these are sheets of paper. When you see these bird cages, this, when you hover over them, this is not a 3D solid. These are literally like 4 pieces of paper that are being held up, okay? So what do? You're like, oh, I have to go back to the beginning and draw polylines instead of regular lines. Well, this is where that hotkey, select it and hit letter J, spacebar. And what that's done is it has taken those 4 lines and converted them into a closed loop. So again, if I use that same tool, extrude takes a 2D object and turns it into a 3D solid, and I go up, let's say I just go up 2 feet in this one. So join is the way I got to that, okay? So that's really the kind of most basic thing. Remembering also the importance of using these polar lines as guides, okay? If you're, the polar button is right down here, and if I hit that, I want to make sure I'm on 90, 180, 270, 360, okay? We've set it up in our perspective unit for 30, 60, 90, 120, but this will be much more helpful, and it'll keep you, it'll give you a compass in this 3D space, okay? So when you're moving something or copying something, make sure you're doing it. Like if I were to copy this, if I kind of do this, it looks like I'm just copying it and moving it to the right, but I'm kind of sure almost that if I hover over this, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I might have actually moved this up into the air or down below the ground or something else, okay? So when you're moving stuff or copying stuff, make sure that you are using these polar lines. See there, that happened right there. It moved it down, okay? Whereas if I were to go ahead and use that polar line as a guide, okay, when I do this, you can see that line, my object stayed right on the floor, okay? So again, recap, make sure you are using connected lines, line segments, arcs, curves, whatever. Same exact thing is true if I'm using a arc or a curve, okay? If I click here, here, and here, and I want to go ahead and make a shape similar to this, okay, I'm going to copy this just so you can again see the difference. Since I'm in a top view, when I moved it, I didn't have to have polar on because it's guaranteeing that everything is locked on the floor, right on the surface. So this one is an individual line and an individual arc. This one is also, but if I select it, letter J, spacebar, go back to, when I try to extrude something in a top view, it just doesn't work, okay? But if I extrude both, you can extrude multiple things at the same time, and you can see right here, that's a sheet of paper, and that is a solid, all right? So try that out. Good luck with it. Remember, this extrude tool we're going to constantly use.